Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Is there really a master plan to pull everything together? As we come on air tonight, Downing Street has just confirmed that the Prime Minister intends to unveil his blueprint for a new Brexit deal. Boris Johnson will lay out the detail tomorrow when he gives his first speech as leader to the Conservative Party conference. Take it, he'll tell the EU, or leave it. But the negotiations end here. Well, today, Mr Johnson clarified that there would need to be customs checks on the island of Ireland to recognise a new customs territory, but he promised that would not mean new infrastructure or border changes. Tonight, we'll be speaking to the UK and Irish governments, as well as to an architect of the Northern Ireland peace deal. In a moment, to Mark Urban, our diplomatic editor in Brussels. But we start this evening with Nick Watt in Manchester at the Conservative Party conference. Nick.
Well, a huge moment for this most turbulent of premierships tomorrow when, as you say, in the hall behind me here, Boris Johnson will outline his final Brexit deal to Brussels. It's being dubbed here as New Deal or No Deal. So quite a finale for Boris Johnson's first Tory conference as Prime Minister. In the spotlight, careful preparation and a leader with his own mind. But now, time for clarity. Closed off for now, but in this conference hall tomorrow, Boris Johnson will outline his final Brexit offer to the EU. A fair and reasonable compromise, he will say. But if Brussels refuses to engage with his offer, then there will be no more negotiations until after the UK has left the EU, will be the stark message.
Thank you very much, guys.
Today, an inkling of the UK offer after the leaking of purported British plans for customs checks within miles of the Northern Ireland border. Yes to checks, says the Prime Minister, but no to placing them so close to the border.
If the EU is going to insist on customs checks as we come out, as it is, then we will have to accept that reality, and there will have to be a system for customs checks away from the border. Now, we think that those checks can be absolutely minimal and non-intrusive and won't involve new infrastructure. Nicky Morgan. One minister is hopeful. Very well. As the author of the alternative arrangements, are you pleased with what we appear to be hearing, which is that Northern Ireland will be wholly in a UK customs zone that will involve checks on the island of Ireland, but done in a way that avoids a hard border?
Well, look, I think the important thing actually is that alternative arrangements are workable, and that's what the work that I had done had shown. I think the detail we're just going to have to wait for. I think there's an awful lot of speculation in the media today. These are detailed discussions that are best done, obviously, between governments, but with the EU, involving the Irish government, listening to opinion in Northern Ireland, which again is what my work has shown, and the work I've done with the Alternative Arrangements Commission. But I do think a deal is absolutely possible. I think the question is going to be, is there enough pragmatism and goodwill on all sides to understand that? Because a deal is infinitely preferable as we leave the EU.
A Brexit convert is happy. Liz Truss, has Boris Johnson found the elixir to solve the Brexit conundrum, or is it all looking rather difficult?
Well, I think it's all looking extremely positive, Nick, and we're making significant progress.
Positive that the UK is sending sort of what you would regard as substantive ideas to Brussels?
Well, I definitely think we are doing a very good job of putting ideas forward. Clearly the EU are willing to discuss those ideas, and we want to move forward on that.
And you're the International Trade Secretary. You want to be able to negotiate trade deals on behalf of the whole of the UK, and Northern Ireland, in your view, presumably needs to be in a United Kingdom customs area.
Well, of course I want to negotiate trade deals on behalf of the whole UK.
Including Northern Ireland? Including Northern Ireland Secretary of State?
Absolutely.
Current ministers naturally on board, but a rebel Tory needs convincing. Do you feel alarmed that these sorts of ideas are out there, even if the Prime Minister is questioning him? Do you feel alarmed, or do you say, no, let's give the Prime Minister time? He is trying to get a deal.
Let's see what he comes up with. I mean, we've got to solve a problem.
You know, our problem is that we don't want a hard border, but we also want Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom as a whole to leave the customs union. That creates a technical problem, and you've got to have a solution that technically works on that.
And anger amongst unionists over the leaking of Brexit plans.
I think what happened yesterday evening, whoever was behind it certainly wasn't working towards a deal. I think this was an act of sabotage to try and make it more difficult in the negotiations, but we've got to work our way through that.
Among friends on the eve of a defining moment for his premiership, a boost, but others will need to travel with him too.
That was Nick Watt, and Nick is still with us. There are some reports of the actual details now of that speech, of that Brexit deal. Nick, what are you hearing?
Yes, so these are important details in the Daily Telegraph of possible UK plans to replace the Northern Ireland backstop. It is being dubbed two borders for 4 years. And the idea would be that after the planned transition ends in 2020, Northern Ireland would remain in large parts of the single market, but Northern Ireland would be in the UK customs union. And what this would mean is that by having regulatory border between Northern Ireland and GB, you'd have Northern Ireland in large parts of the single market, and those customs checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland would mean that Northern Ireland would not be in the EU customs union. Now, the idea is that this would last until 2025, and the hope would be that by then the Northern Ireland institutions would be up and running, and they would be able to decide whether to keep this or to amend this. Now, the UK view is that this report has been briefed by Dublin. They're saying that key chunks of this are correct, but there are some core elements that are wrong. From the EU not impressed by this. And what I'm hearing is that if this is presented on a take it or leave it basis, this would not do justice to Northern Ireland or indeed to the Northern Ireland peace process.
Nick, thanks very much indeed. Well, Brandon Lewis, the Minister for No Deal Preparation, spoke to me 2 hours ago, and I began by asking him what the PM will set out in that conference speech tomorrow.
Yeah, well, the Prime Minister is going to outline very much, it's that opportunity he's got through his speech to talk to the country and to outline to people the clear focus of this government, which is to leave the European Union on the 31st of October, and our key focus and our aim and desire is to do so with a deal, and that's the deal he'll be putting to the European Union for the Council meeting coming up in just a couple of weeks' time. Yeah, because it's not just the focus. We understand that he's unveiling his final offer to the EU, a fair and reasonable compromise. Have you seen what it looks like? Well, I'm not going to outline right here and now ahead of tomorrow's speech. That would spoil the speech for tomorrow, Emily. I'm just trying to understand if this is the final offer, whether his cabinet colleagues have seen it. I'm not expecting you to outline it, but do you know what's in it? Have you seen it? Have you been part of this? Well, I've been, as a member of the cabinet, we're all part of the conversations around what we're doing as we look to leave the European Union. Not the actual deal itself, right? Specifically within our own portfolios. Well, the offer that the Prime Minister will make is an offer he's going to put to the European Union. We'll publish it tomorrow. I'm not going to comment any further on it until it's actually published tomorrow. I think it'd be wrong to do that. We as a government have been very clear that we will leave the European Union on the 31st of October. And I think people watching this programme, I know people vote in different ways on the referendum and people have got different views on this, but one of the things I think we've been very clear about, and I get time and again when I talk to people around the country, is they want to see this done. They want us to have left to do what we said we're going to do. I'm just going to stop you there. As I say, the Prime Minister's been clear we'll do that. I know what our viewers want, and it's to understand the mechanics that get us to the next step. So if the EU doesn't agree to this, and we're told that it's going to be a final offer, and you cannot leave on no deal without breaking the law, how will you do that? How will you deliver Brexit on October the 31st? That's all I'm asking. Well, yeah, well, I'm going to challenge you on two parts of that, the premise of the question there, Emily. First of all, I have to say, talking to residents as I do all over the country and in my own constituency pretty much every week, I've never had any resident ask me about the mechanics. What they ask is, will you please get this done? And you are going to get this done, aren't you? No, well, I'm asking you now because that's my job. That's my job, is to understand how it happens. That's all. Yeah, no, and that's a fair question, Emily. But I was just saying, there's a difference between a conversation we're going to have and what the viewers generally are looking for. And I think they are looking to see that we get this done. Now, in terms of the mechanics, look, we are very focused, and I think it's right. Our key priority is on leaving with a deal and getting this deal agreed. It's a hypothetical after that. We don't know what yet the European Union's response to
be really honest, the whole thing's hypothetical. You haven't seen this deal, I haven't seen this deal, and Brussels hasn't seen this deal, and it's the final offer. So let's just take that one step at a time. You don't know they're going to like it, and if they don't like it, how do we leave on the 31st? How does that happen?
Well, again, as I say, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you in the sense. I'm not going to give you the details of the plan for how we leave in terms of what we do, in terms of responding to the Ben bill. We've been very clear, though. We will respect the law. The Prime Minister is very clear. We will follow the law, but we are going to leave on 31st of October.
You don't know.
Well, I think we need to take this one step at a time. First focus, first priority is to put this deal to the European Union, continue those negotiations through to European Council, and hopefully to get an agreement that we leave with a deal.
Hopefully he's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. We're all asking the same question. How?
Well, as I say, first things first. In the next 24 hours, we will all see, the entire country and our European partners will see the details behind the deal that the Prime Minister is going to be putting forward.
Brandon, you're sent out to bat on his behalf. You're having a hard time answering some of these questions because presumably the Prime Minister himself is a man who finds it very difficult to give a straight answer. I'm going to bring up the case of Jennifer Arcuri, who you will know is given funds from a company linked to the Mayor's office. You've been party chairman. You know how money at this level works. Now, Boris Johnson was making regular visits to Ms Arcuri's flat for what we now know were technology lessons. Does any of that worry you when you're asking us to trust the Prime Minister?
Well, actually, I would say two things. On that very direct question, I would say, look, the Prime Minister himself has been very, very clear that there was no impropriety, that everything was done according to the book, and I'm sure that the work that I know they...
He hasn't been
City
clear.
Hall seems to want to play games
He couldn't even deny today that he had an affair.
I'm sure that investigation will come to that conclusion.
He couldn't
that's
even...
not actually what you were talking about. Your initial
I'm just saying, you said he's been very clear and he
relationship in terms of those deals.
If there's no impropriety, you would expect him to give evidence then, to be able to say that without any concern at all. Would it trouble you if he declined an invitation to do so? We know that this is being investigated now.
Well, as you appreciate, as a Home Office Minister, I'm not going to prejudge any kind of investigation. I never did as chairman when the party was looking at things. I'm not going to on this.
You're really confident this is the man that you're putting your trust in to deliver one of the most complicated political acts of statecraft in our lifetimes, who can't even ask and answer simple questions?
Well, actually, I would disagree with you on that and say that I think he has. This is the man who led that campaign to leave the European Union. He is actually doing the work over this summer, and we have been consistently delivering on what he outlined on the steps of Downing Street, which is investing in the NHS, investing in our education services, investing in our police. Been more announcements on that today, and on criminal justice as well. And actually is determined to do what the people want to see done, which is get Brexit done, get it delivered, and do that by the 31st of October. There'll be more details about that tomorrow. You're the Minister for No Deal Brexit, or contingency plans. I just want to ask you about Greggs the bakers. They're stockpiling pork so that production of sausage rolls can be guaranteed in the event of no deal Brexit. Do you think that's reassuring or alarmist? Well, as I said to you, we're going to publish our work on the no-deal preparation. I deputise in the Home Office on preparation for Brexit, but we will be publishing all of the details around our preparation work for no deal with that Yellow Hammer update, which will be coming out very, very soon. I'm just asking about sausage rolls. Would you be stockpiling pork if you were Greggs? Well, in terms of, I have to say, as somebody who does like the old sausage roll, from a range of different suppliers, I'm always pleased to see they've got them in stock. It's a commercial decision for them about what is right for them, but we are very determined to ensure that we keep good flow through our borders so that business can continue to grow and develop across the country and across all sectors. Brandon Lewis, thank you very much indeed. Well, our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, is in Brussels tonight. We're not quite sure what Cabinet here knows about the details of that deal, Mark. Do we understand whether Brussels have seen the offer and what they're making of it?
Yes, national governments have been briefed in some detail. So that was a process of calls that Boris Johnson was involved in, we hear. And the formal tabling of the offer to the EU will happen tomorrow. Now, we've been told that there'll be a full meeting of the 27 EU ambassadors also tomorrow afternoon, I guess, to react or relay the feelings of their national governments to this. But the mood is definitely glum here because the offer, as reported, seems to cut across this key EU red line: no customs border on the island of Ireland. And that means that, for example, this evening, just before we went on air, the Irish Europe Minister has already said that the deal, as reported, is unacceptable. So it looks like it's going to be a pretty difficult day tomorrow and a pretty clear no from the EU.
Mark Evan, thanks very much indeed. Well, joining us now from Limerick in Ireland is Patrick O'Donovan, the Minister for Finance. And with us here is Jonathan Powell, Tony Blair's Chief of Staff, who played a leading role in the negotiations which led to the Good Friday Agreement. If I can come straight to you, Patrick O'Donovan, has the Irish government had prior sight of what is being offered tomorrow? Do you know it?
No, we don't. I mean, we've heard a lot of media speculation, and there's a report obviously on the front page of a major broadsheet paper tomorrow, and there's reports of what the Prime Minister is going to say to his conference. But there hasn't been any formal proposals made to the EU27, which is the proper forum in which proposals of this nature should be made. But as previous reports have already stated during the earlier pieces, nothing has changed from an EU27 point of view. There can be no return to a hard border on the island of Ireland because, as all of us know, over the last number of years, successive governments of all parties, both in Britain and in Ireland, have invested a huge amount of time and energy, along with the people of Northern Ireland and the border communities in Ireland, to make sure that there is no return to the violence that happened there before.
Let me just give you some of the lines that are coming out, at least from this Telegraph report, and see how they sound to you. The headline is, if you like, 2 borders for 4 years, which would leave Northern Ireland in a special relationship with Europe until 2025. And this means that Northern Ireland would remain in large parts of the EU single market, but will leave the EU customs union alongside the rest of the UK. This is incredibly complex detail for many of us. Does that sound workable from the position of the Irish government?
Well, this sounds like the possibility and the suggestion that was previously made of a time-limited backstop, which is an insurance policy that runs out over a period of time. I mean, we've said as a government from the very start that Northern Ireland and the Good Friday Agreement deserves a proper insurance policy, legally binding over not over a period of time, but indefinitely. The people in Northern Ireland didn't vote to be taken out of the European Union; they voted actually to remain in the European Union. And the position that the Irish government and the EU27 has held for a long time now is that Ireland's position in the common market and the customs union has to be maintained. This is a British decision to leave the European Union. The Good Friday Agreement has to be maintained, and there can be no return to any hard border, and that includes any forms of physical installations on the border in Ireland.
OK, so when Boris Johnson will call this fair and reasonable in the speech tomorrow, is Ireland expecting to compromise on whatever is put on the table? Are you open to some kind of negotiation? Are you open to receive what he's calling a final offer?
Well, first of all, it isn't a bilateral negotiation between Ireland and the United Kingdom. Ireland is negotiating through the Barnier Task Force. It's the Barnier Task Force that have said over the last number of weeks, since the Prime Minister was in Berlin, where we heard of a blistering timescale. He went from there to Luxembourg. He has been in other EU capitals. He understands that the EU position on all of these matters remains the same, which is there can be no hardening of the border on the island of Ireland. Okay. There has been too much investment made over a long period of time in the Good Friday Agreement, and the people of Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland deserve a lot better than that.
Patrick O'Donovan, thank you very much indeed. Let's go straight to Jonathan Powell. The deal, from what we understand, is being unilaterally offered. Certainly it sounded as if the EU as a body haven't seen it. Do you think this can be well received from what you've read and heard so far?
If the deal in the Daily Telegraph is indeed what they're putting forward, and I assume since it's Boris Johnson's newspaper it is accurate since it's been briefed there, it's a variant of the deal offered yesterday. that was exposed by the leaks yesterday. In other words, it's imposing a hard border in Northern Ireland, just the opposite of what we promised at the beginning of this negotiation with the EU. It's not therefore going to be acceptable to the EU, it's not going to be acceptable in Northern Ireland to the majority of the population, and it's not going to be acceptable in the Republic of Ireland. It is not a serious proposal, and presumably what they're doing is simply trying to avoid a deal to get to no deal, as we've always assumed they were going to do. This is the final confirmation, that's their aim.
You think this is a political strategy to get Brussels to reject something that allows for no deal?
It's about the blame game, trying to blame Brussels for this, and I think the quote from Dominic Cummings in the Daily Telegraph story, where he says we're going to offer it to them once and then walk away and not negotiate, suggests that's exactly what their aim is, yes.
So just help us to understand this, because Boris Johnson said that he said there'd be no infrastructure, it would be absolutely minimal and unobtrusive. So his understanding of a hard deal is not the same as yours.
He said today,
a hard border, sorry.
When he denied the leaks from last night, which appear to be correct, in fact, a surprise, he said that the proposals there last night were wrong. Actually, what he's proposing is exactly the same thing. That there will be, he confirmed in the interviews today, a customs border in Northern Ireland. And of course, there has to be a customs border.
He didn't say customs border, did he?
He did. He
said
did in
checks.
the interviews earlier
today.
today.
He said customs checks, which
the second
is not
interview,
the same.
The first interview he gave today, he talked about customs border. He said that the United Kingdom as a whole is leaving the customs union, that therefore has to be a customs border. He said that.
So what could that mean then? Just help us understand, because it's all to do with this understanding of infrastructure. Is a camera infrastructure, is that a border?
A customs border can be made up of many different things, and it can be put in different places. It can be patrols, it could be infrastructure like cameras, it could be border checks, it could be border check yards back behind the border. Whatever unobtrusive. The point of this is not how long it takes a lorry to cross the border in Northern Ireland. That is not the issue. The issue is identity. The Good Friday Agreement tried to solve the issue of identity by allowing people in Northern Ireland to live there and feel Irish or feel British or feel both. If you put in a customs border, as you have to if they leave the customs union, then that will be destroyed.
Is there anything coherent in what you're seeing here that would lead us to a Brexit deal by the end of October?
No, it looks to me very much like something that's been put forward by someone who is not serious at reaching a deal, that actually intends to leave without a deal. Even the idea of putting this in 4 years' time to a vote at Stormont is not serious. Firstly, Stormont doesn't exist, hasn't existed for the last 2 years, no particular prospect of getting it up and running. If you put it to Stormont, Stormont is ruled by cross-community consensus. It would have to be approved by both Sinn Féin and the DUP. And as we know, there's no prospect of that happening. It's simply a way of avoiding any of this ever being agreed. It's a scam, really.
So when Nicky Morgan said that these alternative arrangements are being explored because there is confidence that they can work, is that magic?
It's nonsense. This not only couldn't work, it is not ever going to be acceptable to the EU, to the Irish government, or to the majority of the population in Northern Ireland. It is just a pretence that they're putting forward a proposal. To say it's a new deal is absolute nonsense.
What do you think is in store then for the island of Ireland?
Well, what I worry about is we're going to have a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit, which will lead to a border having to be imposed in Northern Ireland. The Irish government said earlier that they would try not to impose one straight away if the UK leaves without a deal, but will have to. They'll have to bring one in because the rest of the EU won't accept a gaping back door to the EU. So it will gradually be introduced and will create huge problems in Northern Ireland and should much best be avoided. This whole nonsense about getting Brexit done, the idea that a no-deal Brexit gets Brexit done is ridiculous. It actually takes the negotiations much longer. It will take another 10 years to negotiate. If we go out, we will no longer be negotiating under Article 50. We'll be negotiating as a foreign country with the EU, and we'll have to negotiate on the Irish border as the first step.
Jonathan Powell, thank you very much indeed. Let's go back to Mark Urban. You've heard those words then from Jonathan Powell, who was part of the negotiating team, who thinks that this is a political strategy to end up with no deal. Any chance of an agreement from the EU?
Look, essentially, this problem is in two bits, and this deal tries to say you have the regulatory bit, the bit to do with trading standards, animal health, all that stuff on the east-west border, and the customs bit on the north-south border. That makes it very complex. Now, what some people here had been hoping was that you could essentially bring round the customs issue so that they aligned and you would effectively have Northern Ireland in the backstop. Now, clearly that is not the way that Boris Johnson is going. It's a huge problem, as you've heard from the other guests. And frankly, even if the will was there to try and work this out and work out a way not to have a customs border on the land part of it, the north-south border, Northern and Southern Ireland, even if the will was there, it's so different in approach to the one that Michel Barnier and his team have been taking, that technically it would take a lot longer to work out than the time that's available.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. Mark Evans there in Brussels.
I've been getting away